Salvete discipuli. Today we're going to discuss the fourth and fifth declensions of Latin nouns, and congratulations, this is it. There are only 5 declensions of nouns in Latin. And remember, you have already seen all of the active verb endings, so that is right. After this video, you will have seen all of the noun endings and all of the active verb endings. Congratulations, discipuli. Before we learn the fourth and the fifth declensions, let's first review the first 3 declensions, declensions 1, 2, and 3. And in first declension, we have our song to the tune of Dashing Through the Snow. Room is us is. That's the first declension. Easy as you please, ha 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 ha. And of course, remember that we have an essential A in the ablative singular. Our second declension song to the tune of The Farmer in the Dell. Declining we will go with usio umo a e o rumis osis. It's second declension yo. Our third declension song to the tune of Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Blank is EMA. Wonder if you've heard. Acum ibus, ace and ibus. This declension's third. And then, of course, for the neuters, what we need to remember is that all neuter nominative, accusative, and vocative forms will always be copied over from the nominative, and they're always going to end in an A in those 3 cases, the nominative, accusative, and vocative. After that, we can just copy the rest of those endings over to be left with our second and third declension neuter endings highlighted in the boxes. As just a reminder in how to identify the declension of a noun, know that we have principal parts for our noun endings as well. The first principal part, that's going to be your nominative singular. It's going to tell you the gender of a noun or the likely gender of a noun. And the second principal part is usually the genitive singular, and that is what's going to tell you if it belongs to declensions 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. I highly recommend that you look at the genitive singular first. It almost is always the more important one. It's more important to know what declension the noun belongs to than it is to know which gender it is. So as just a quick reminder, in first declension, your genitive singular is an AE, and that A nominative singular indicates it's likely to be feminine. In second declension, your genitive singular is an I form, whether it's masculine or neuter, and then the US or the R in the nominative singular tells you it's likely to be masculine, and the UM in the nominative singular tells you it's likely to be neuter. In third declension, your genitive singular is an IS form, and since it has so many different forms for the nominative singular, a quick review. If it's X, it's likely to be feminine. If it's OR, it's likely to be masculine, except for that exception, arbor, arboris, tree. And then for the neuters, your neuter nominatives will likely end in US, MEN, TER, or UR in the nominative singular. And those are all indications of a verb, or I'm sorry, a word that is likely to be neuter in gender. To help you identify the declension, it is also sometimes useful to think about the vowels that tend to be specific to each declension. First declension seems to have a lot of A's in it, second declension a lot of O's or a lot of U's, and third declension really seems to have a lot of E's. As we continue learning the fourth and the fifth declensions, you'll notice that they too have vowels that are pretty common throughout their endings. So let's first take a look at the fourth declension. First, our dictionary entry will be us in the nominative singular and us in the genitive singular. Notice that the genitive singular has a macron. This is going to be an essential macron. You need this macron to distinguish it between the nominative and the genitive forms. And as I said before, you almost always want to look at the genitive singular first to decide which declension it is before you look at the nominative. Otherwise, you may decide that your fourth declension word is a second declension word as well, since the US appears in second declension as well. Fourth declension words are usually masculine if they end in US. We do have a few exceptions to the rule, namely the words for house and hand, domus, domus, and manus, manus. And there are a few words that are neuter, and these will be fourth declension, US with a macron, and then their nominative form will be a U to indicate their neuter gender. A couple of examples, horn and knee, cornu, cornus, and genu, genus are both neuter, but as I said before, there's not a lot of neuter nouns in fourth declension. You don't need to write any of these down. These do appear on a vocabulary list, but other fourth declension nouns that you have encountered or you will encounter are aestus, heat, aquaeductus, aqueduct, arcus, arch, complexus, hug, risus, a laugh, senatus, the senate, sonetus, a sound, strepitus, a crash, exitus, the exit, tumultus, a crowd, and then the neuter examples previously given in this video, genu, knee, and cornu, horn. As I've mentioned before, for the fourth declension masculine endings, remember that that genitive singular does have an essential macron, and it's this genitive singular form which is going to tell you that it is in fact the fourth declension of noun. The nominative singular, the US form, is what's going to tell you that it's likely to be masculine. And the fourth declension song is actually also to the tune of Dashing Through the Snow, the second verse. Us, ui, us, ibus. Fourth declension has a U, but also an I to trip us. And that's because most forms are going to start with a U except for in the dative and ablative plural, which have the characteristic third declension ibus. The macrons over the nominative, accusative, and vocative plurals are also essential macrons. So we actually have 4 essential macrons in fourth declension. Otherwise, we're going to get them confused with that nominative singular form. Now in the neuters, you know that we only need to worry about the nominative, accusative, and vocative endings because otherwise we're copying them straight from the fourth declension masculine endings. So I've gone ahead and already copied those over. Now one oddity about fourth declension neuter nouns is that the dative doesn't actually get copied. Instead of that UI form that we had for masculine, we're going to chop off the I and it's just going to be a U. So the dative and the ablative in the neuter are exactly the same. As I've previously discussed, the neuter nominative singular for fourth declension is a U, which means that the accusative and the vocative are also U's. In the singular, the only form that is not a U is this genitive singular, which is part of the dictionary entry for when you memorize your nouns. And of course, all neuters in the nominative, accusative, and vocative plurals will always have an A. Because it's fourth declension and it's a declension of a lot of U's, it's not going to be just an A, it's going to be a UA in the nominative, accusative, and vocative plurals. And of course, kawete, remember that we do still have that essential macron in the genitive singular. Discipli, take a moment, pause the video, and practice declining arcus, arcus, a fourth declension noun in all forms in the nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, and vocative. Pause the video while you complete this practice, and then we'll go over the answers. Our declension for arcus arcus is up on the board. Go ahead and check your work. One thing to keep in mind, did you get all of those essential macrons? And did you remember that there are in fact 2 U's in the genitive plural, not just a UM, but a UUM. For fifth declension discipuli, our last declension of nouns ever in Latin. Reminder that we have our dictionary entry that begins with the nominative singular and then goes on into the genitive singular. It's this EI ending that tells us that a word belongs to fifth declension, and then the nominative singular will give us some clues as to the gender. Now, really in fifth declension, I would say most words are feminine. There are a few masculine words, but quite frankly, there's really only a few words that are particularly important in the fifth declension. You're going to see both of them during this video. Discipli, our fifth declension song is to the tune of One Little, Two Little, Three Little Senators. Ace, A, M, and A. That's the 5th declensions way. Ace, Arum, Abus, Ace, and Abus. Soon it will be famous. And as you can see, the 5th declension is primarily a declension of ease. One thing to note is that we are back to a vowel plus the rum ending, much like the arum and orum genitive plurals of first and second conjugations, or first and second declensions. The difference here is that the e makes this primarily a 5th declension word, and instead of an ibus ending that we see in 3rd and 4th declensions for the dative and ablative plural, we are again left with the e. Pretty much any ending in the 5th declension should have some sort of E attached to it. As examples, I'm going to show you one of the most common 5th declension nouns, and then I'll have you practice with the other most common 5th declension noun. Our first example is dies, D-A-E, which is a masculine word for day. Most of the other words will be feminine, and our forms are dies, D-A, D-A, D-M, D-A, not die, dies, dies, dierum, diebus, dies, diebus, and dies. One thing to note, Discipuli, when we are putting in all of our forms after you drop down the nominative and drop down the genitive, our base of the word is going to be whatever is left over after we take off that full genitive singular ending, and it's both the E and the I. So remember to include the full base form from the genitive when you are declining your nouns in the 5th declension. As your practice, please decline res, rei, a feminine word that can mean situation, thing, affair, matter, in the 5th declension, paying particular attention to using the correct base after you take the genitive singular ending off. Go ahead and pause the video, and then we'll show the answers in just one moment. Discipuli, here you can see the declension of res, rei, situation, thing, affair, matter, res, rei, rei, rem, rei, res, res, rerum, rebus, res, rebus, and res. And here for this particular word, after we drop down the nominative and the genitive singulars, we're taking that ending off, and our base is in fact just one letter, the R. So we're attaching our endings to that base, the R, and we're left with a very short word that gets used in a lot of different contexts. This is by far one of the words to know for Latin 2. Discipuli, take a moment and pause the video. I'd like you to identify all possible cases and numbers. So for example, sonetus, which has a macron over the US, is a 4th declension word that could be genitive singular, or it could be nominative, accusative, or vocative plural. Go ahead and for the rest of these nouns, identify all possible cases and numbers based on which declension of word you think it is. And you can see the answers on the video. Go ahead and check your work. We'll continue with one more exercise after this. Here are 5 more words in 4th and 5th declensions. Pause the video as you identify all possible cases and numbers of these 5 words before we look at the answers. And Discipuli, you can check your work on the board now. When we're thinking about 4th and 5th declension nouns, the most important thing is to keep practicing those songs to yourself so that you can get all of the endings in their proper order so that you'll be able to correctly interpret a sentence as you read it when you encounter these new 4th and 5th declension nouns. Valete, Discipuli.